Hey guys, it's me, Gabriel, coming to you with that evening spark. So, your worth beyond your image. So, what I mean by that is that your worth of who you are is so much more beyond all the self images or roles that you have made, that have been imposed upon you and impressed upon you very much so that you need to be this kind of person or that kind of person. Many of which it's this notion that it's actually, in a sense, a sort of idol that we've created within ourselves. This idea that you have to be this certain whatever in order to feel safe or valued or admired. That your self-worth is based off of this external desire to try to change your external or manipulate it or control it. And some of it, I think, comes from a good intention, like wanting to be a good friend or wanting to be a good parent, a good worker, and all these things. But I've noticed that what happens is that it doesn't allow us to feel our feelings as we should, and to truly react to things and respond to things, more importantly, respond to things directly and fully. What you're doing then is you're responding to something as your role says you should. I notice this is an issue often in the military because in the military you're supposed to be this certain kind of person, and then what ends up happening is that then you get things like PTSD, and there's a great deal of anxiety and depression and like a sense of loneliness, is because you're trying to fulfill this role for which you really cannot, because you create this just impossible ideal, because it's not you. It's you're trying to compartmentalize. I think I'm saying that right. Yourself into these these very rigid roles, and so you don't allow yourself to feel as you need to feel, as your soul is needing you to feel. So you do yourself a great disservice. And so, I mean, think of a lot of times we get so fixated. We're like this die, and it looks like your life is all of this die, but then you don't realize that where this is a role, it's so much bigger. I mean, now look at proportionally, so much bigger. And we have all these roles. I have, the airman, the friend, the good airman, the good athlete, the good spiritual shepherd, what have you. And so we put ourselves in all these things, and much of it, like I was saying, is based out of this notion of trying to control and manipulate your externals, the external. But here's the thing, man. And this is getting into the inner and outer landscape of our lives, is that your life is not founded on the outer landscape, as far as you're now say you're not directed by your I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I'll just get into the analogy. So, for instance, a sunset. The sunset does not. You do not feel joy from the sunset itself. It's your inner landscape that gives you an appreciation for it. I guess directed might be the right word. Anyways, that's okay. It doesn't matter. I think you get what I'm saying. I hope you do. And so, right there, it just shows how this notion to try to change your external circumstances, to constantly try and manipulate it all, causes us to feel this great depression often, this great anxiety that you'll be found out. Because I know it can hurt when, for instance, you try to live up to these rules of your role that you have constructed in your mind subconsciously or consciously, or that have been directed onto you, that this is how you are supposed to act, and if you don't, there will be shaming and ridicule and rejection. I think a lot of times guys feel that way, and women. Really, women. There's a lot of shaming. I mean, if you aren't this person who's hairless from the eyebrows down and has this perfect physique and is able to just and it has all these qualities, there's a lot of pressure there. Like, not even as much compared for guys in the physical. I think there is also a lot of physical demands because you have to be this big swole guy, and because if you're not, you're looked at as weak or inadequate or what have you. That being said, that's obviously a whole bunch of hoobaloo. The whole alpha male thing is just a bunch of nonsense, but we're not going to get into that. So that being said, there's a lot of pressures that get imposed upon us to feel like we have to be a certain way. And I think to that extent, that's why when someone can be genuinely authentic and just be them, man, just be you. Because here's an example, okay, of how this is also relative. Like, okay, you don't do as well in your job. It's not, before I give an example, it's when you don't do well, and this is something that's really helped me because in my career field, I deal with a lot of criticism as far as like critiques and edits and stuff goes. So it's very much so that notion of the good airman, the good photojournalist is, if you're not careful, it gets brought into question day in and day out, and that can really wear on you. And it definitely has weared on me to the point where I realized I needed to find something that can help me maintain and reconcile and cope with this, because it's not helpful to just keep getting that sort of bombarded mindset. So what it is like when you, and whatever it may be in your career field or education, whatever, it's not, don't think of it as you're a failure. It's, remember, you're not, when you get so absorbed into that one role, you think when you fail, that's all of you. That's you're done. But you don't realize, okay, that's a part of you that hasn't lived up to that ideal of you have placed. Because here's the thing, when I was in college, I did track and field and cross country. And in cross country, you predominantly do an 8-kilometer run, and I ran like 32s or so. And in college, ain't nobody gonna look twice at that. But in here in the Air Force, I run 1.5 miles in 9 minutes, and suddenly I'm the bee's knees. And this is by no braggadocious kind of means. It's more of just to illustrate how my running capacity, if anything, I got slower, because it took everything that I had to be able to run that 1.5 miles in 9 minutes. Whereas before in college, I probably could pump out something in like the mid-8s for 1.5 miles. That being said, even then, running a slower time, and yet I'm regarded in higher esteem. So the time itself didn't change in that regard, but what changed is the perception. So it's all relative in that regard. So what you may think is inadequate may not very well be. And I know, that being said, it doesn't really help when you're in the moment and it sucks. But I think what that can help illustrate and what can help bring to light is that there is there is so much more to you. There's just so much more to you and who you are, and that again, it's not that outer landscape. It's not the fact that you have to have this amount of money to be happy, or to have this kind of job to be happy. It's not the outer landscape. It's not your external for which you're trying to manipulate and control, but that it's what you're learning and growing about yourself that's really important. Your soul, the Holy Spirit, is far more interested not in what girlfriend or not girlfriend that you have, what job you have, or what have you, but it's more about what you're growing from that. And that's your true worth. That's how it's truly being fostered and facilitated and groomed and grown. So right there, man, you see yourself as so much more than these roles. Because that's really helped me when I get like some edit, or I get some bad news, or I get, just the many things that you may seem to rattle you. When you think, oh man, what happens if she says no? Or what happens if I don't do well on this whatever, on this assignment or this project? Well, you can go back and recognize that it's not that I'm a failure. It's not that you're a failure. It's that you just didn't live up to that role. But then you have to recognize that, well, what is that role? What is it? In all honesty, it's like you were so much more than that. The proclamation I have for you is that you recognize that I am more than the sums of my part. You are more than the sums of your part. You are more than these roles that you have in your life. You're so much more. There's so much more. So you don't have to feel like you're a total failure, because God's got you. He's got you. He's on you. He hasn't forgotten about you. He hasn't neglected you. And yeah, you're still going to have to probably go to work. You're still going to do a lot of these things, even though you can transcend and go beyond them. And you realize that there's so much more to yourself than just these things alone. And I think it helps take a bit of the bite out of these things that we feel, these roles that we impose upon ourselves, that we feel like we have to live up to. And that you can go forward in them with the utmost vigor, but yet you can also detach yourself to the point of where you can recognize that if things may not go as you want, that it's okay, because you're so much more than those parts. And that's really cool to see that your self-worth is beyond those roles, that they don't define you. They are but a part of you, of an expression of your soul. And when you align your personalities with your soul, then that's when you really start jamming, baby. That's what I've been trying to do with you guys, with these videos and things like that. And I surely hope they help. I'm feeling like this is a good place to end. I hope some of this has helped. I hope some of it's given you some perspective and insight. But for now, this is Wolfpack, Gabriel, signing off. And I hope you guys have a blessed night and that it's filled with peace. See ya.